Up ahead on The Big Story, fully green by 2040, we assess the government's big push for electric vehicles. Singapore draws praise from the WHO for its handling of the coronavirus outbreak. But over in Hong Kong, a second death has been reported. Good evening, you're watching The Big Story, where we discuss the hottest topics of the day. I'm Olivia Quay, coming to you live from the Straits Times newsroom. Now, the government is making a big push for electric vehicles, with Finance Minister Heng Swee Keat announcing several incentives for the use of cleaner engine technologies.
For both public health and climate change reasons, we should progressively phase out the use of ICE vehicles. Will set a long-term strategic goal for Singapore to achieve this. Our vision is to phase out ICE vehicles and have all vehicles run on cleaner energy by 2040.
To that end, Minister Heng announced several measures to make EVs a viable option. First, the vehicular emission scheme will be extended to light commercial vehicles. Second, an early adoption incentive scheme will be rolled out for EV buyers from 2021 to 2023. It will offer rebates capped at $20,000 per vehicle. Third, the road tax for EVs and some hybrids will be revised to be less punitive. And lastly, Singapore will expand the EV charging infrastructure significantly from 1,600 points now to 28,000 by 2030. But will this be enough to make you switch to an electric vehicle? Joining me now is senior transport correspondent Christopher Tan. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Olivia.
Hi. So, Christopher, what was your first impression when Minister Heng announced these measures, as well as the ambitious goal of having all vehicles run on cleaner energy by 2040? That's just in 20 years. How realistic is that?
Well, I think for the deadline or for the target, I think it's a bit unrealistic. Because we have about 1 million vehicles on the road now and still growing year on year. And to achieve the target, you have to be replacing 50 to 60,000 of them every year, each year.
Wow.
Yeah. And as to my reaction to Mr. Heng's announcement, I thought, yeah, wow, yeah, and it's about time too.
But what challenges do you foresee, maybe in the realm of public charging infrastructure, because there are only 1,600 charging points in Singapore?
Yes, and he said that we would build 28,000 by 2030. Even that is insufficient, because if you want to have the entire population move over to electric vehicle, if we understand his goal to be, on face value, that to convert all 900 over 1,000 vehicles to electric, then we will have to have a lot more charging points, right? I mean, if it's just one-to-one, easily we will need 900,000 to 1 million charging points, right?
I see. What other challenges do you expect in implementing all these measures?
The thing about electric vehicles adoption is that people must want to have them. And the reasons why people are not taking them up, in Singapore at least, there are many reasons. One would be the shortage of model choices. There are not many choices that people can pick from. And the reason for that is also a chicken and egg, right? Because if the environment is not suitable or not seen to be very encouraging for electric vehicles, the dealers or the manufacturers won't offer these models here in Singapore. And if you don't have that, then people don't have a choice to buy. Right now, we have a handful of them, maybe around a dozen of them. Most of them are quite pricey. Even the mass market models like the Hyundais are like 20%, 25% costlier than an equivalent combustion engine model. So you have the price barrier, right? And then you have shortage of charging infrastructure. And then you have the uncertainty over perhaps the long-term durability of such vehicles. We have seen in our phones and our laptops how batteries behave, right? They don't always hold their charge for a long time. When I say a long time, I mean over many years. And we tend to hold our cars for, if we want to make a good economic sense, we hold them for 10 years. How would the battery behave over the course of 10 years? Right. Would they be able to retain as much charge as they would on day one?
Yeah.
Well,
fantastic points. Yeah, fantastic points. But so do you think that the new measures are sufficient to address these pain points, all the gaps and the problems that you just mentioned?
They will address some of them, but not all of them.
Right.
Yes. And I think it's stepping in the right direction. One little thing about the whole announcement that kind of jars a little would be the lump sum tax component. Now, this lump sum tax component is to make up for the foreseeable drop in fuel excise duty should people convert to electric cars.
Yep.
I think it's a valid concern, because excise duty from fuel sales amount to nearly $1 billion a year. It's not a small change. It's quite a lot of money. But I think it could have been addressed differently. I think if we wanted to encourage people to adopt or move away from combustion engines, the people who do the adoption to make the first moves should not be penalized. In fact, the people who don't move, maybe you should think of ways to nudge them along. So one way would be to increase the excise duty for fuels, right? I mean, in that way, you have a push and pull. Right now, we have a sort of a push and push away.
I see. Well, Christopher, thank you so much for your time. That was Christopher Tan, Senior Transport Correspondent for the Straits Times. He spoke to industry players for their reactions on these incentives as well, and you can read all about that at straitstimes.com. Now, the number of coronavirus cases in Singapore has grown to 81, with 4 new confirmed cases yesterday. 3 of the new cases are linked to the Grace Assembly of God cluster. The other case is linked to a private doctor infected earlier. Of the 81 patients here, 29 have recovered. Most of the rest are stable or improving, and 4 are in critical condition. In the meantime, the World Health Organization has praised Singapore's response to the outbreak here.
Yesterday, I spoke to Singapore's Minister of Health, and we're very impressed with the efforts they're making to find every case, follow up with contacts, and stop transmission. Singapore is leaving no stone unturned, testing every case of influenza-like illness and pneumonia, and so far they have not found evidence of community transmission.
From doctors and nurses to police officers, these are the frontline fighters battling the coronavirus for Singapore. You can now show your support for them by writing a note of thanks on the Straits Times tribute wall. Since Sunday, there's been close to 1,000 posts and more are coming in. So join the rest of Singapore in posting your message at the link below. Meanwhile, the death toll from the coronavirus in mainland China passed 2,000 today, but the number of new cases fell for a second straight day. The latest figures bring the total number of cases in China to over 74,000. In Hong Kong, a second death has been reported. Officials said a patient was a 70-year-old man with underlying illnesses. He was taken to hospital on February 12th after a fall at home. He had a fever and tested positive for the virus, and he died a week later. So let's find out more about the situation in Hong Kong with Hong Kong correspondent Claire Huang. Now, Claire, give us an idea of what's happening on the ground. Has the report of a second death heightened fears and possibly triggered more measures to curb the spread?
Hi, Olivia. So everyone's on alert here. There's no visible panic. I was out earlier, so, things are business as usual. Now, families with helpers are afraid of sending their employees out. And then you've got people who are working from home, civil servants working from home. So if the job allows, obviously. So there are lesser people in the streets, in the trains, restaurants, etc. To be fair, the 2 deaths that we have had in Hong Kong, both patients had underlying conditions. Okay, so over the Carrie Lam administration was blasted for being slow, but the city has issued a mandatory 2-week quarantine for anyone arriving from mainland China, and this was issued 2 weeks ago. And from today, the hospital authority will expand its surveillance to cover patients in general outpatient clinics, as well as accident and emergency departments, A&E departments. So those people who are aged 18 or above, and they have symptoms like fever, respiratory symptoms, mild chest infection, they will be given a specimen bottle for collection of deep throat saliva, which then they will send back. And then, this is the idea that they want to test people who, might have gotten it earlier. Yeah.
Right. Well, Claire, there are also media reports of expats leaving Hong Kong because of the coronavirus and the ongoing protests. How bad is that situation?
Well, experts were already considering their options, Olivia, during the prolonged demonstrations last year. And the coronavirus outbreak has certainly tipped the scales for some of them. I think we are in a period of transition. So typically in the first quarter, around this time, you have a lot of houses, leases that are up for rent and things like that. We know that a lot of the families, the expats have gone back. Some have chosen not to come back here. But I do see people coming back here as well, and then there are, of course, those families taking a break overseas to avoid the virus situation, right? Because there's also no school. So there are people who continue to stay on. What I would say is this: you can expect more of them to avoid Hong Kong in the months ahead. In the months ahead is what we are looking at, because Hong Kong is projected to have its first back-to-back annual recessions on record. Now, the economy is already weakened by the unrest, and the outbreak has just worsened the situation. So it's not all doom and gloom, though, because when this passes, and it will pass, right? It's just a matter of how long it takes. Things will probably start to slowly recover.
Well, what's the latest on the pro-democracy protest then? Has it taken a back seat, so to speak, in light of the coronavirus outbreak?
Oh, definitely. The virus has provided a respite from early intense demonstrations. So, things have cooled down for the time being. The anti-government protests that started last year, has subsided. They're now smaller scale, more peaceful, things like lunchtime assemblies, and so on. But there's a new problem. All right, we're seeing virus-related issues that are sparking off new demonstrations. For instance, on Sunday, hundreds of demonstrators rallied for a second day to protest against plans to turn some of the buildings into quarantine centers. This is not in my backyard syndrome, right? And then today, you've got pro-establishment group rallying outside the government's headquarters to urge the opposition to pass the multi-billion-dollar relief package that was unveiled by Carrie Lam. So this is a very divided city. You still got smaller scale protests. Everybody wants their views implemented. So I will be surprised, though, if no one says a word.
Well, thank you so much, Claire. That was Claire Huang, Hong Kong correspondent for the Straits Times. The city has reported its second death from COVID-19. And those are our top stories for today. Keep up to date with news in Singapore and around the world at straitstimes.com. I'm Olivia Quay. See you tomorrow for more stories on The Big Story.